Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
And here we are now in the second week of February. Probably still cold wherever you are. It's probably still cold here. It's really cold. This morning it was like 14 degrees, and I realized that our northern and Canadian listeners are probably laughing because they're like, oh, that's super warm. Anything above zero is great. So, but for us, it's very cold here.
Kevin has coworkers, or like people he works with who live in like Minnesota, and one day they were like, yeah, the high is -5 degrees or some shit like that. Like they're like, oh yeah, it's gonna be like 5 today. That's super warm.
Yeah. Yeah, I follow this girl on TikTok, and she's Mayanite with the babies. Everybody knows who she is. But she lives in like upstate New York, and she's like, yeah, it's like a really warm 20 degrees. So like we're gonna walk to my mom's house instead of driving. And I'm like, it's a warm 20 degrees. Like, that's the point where I'm like, do I still want to go on my walk? Like I think 20 is about my limit. Anything below 20, I'm like, I don't think we're gonna do that. So
yeah, Kevin and I like walked home last night like from the bar, and our friend was like, you're insane. I was like, it's a 7-minute walk. I think we'll be okay.
Like we'll make it. Yeah. That's all we really got, you know. It's a slow week, not a whole lot.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot to talk about.
Yeah, nothing big. We do have a true crime-ish thing to talk about here at the top. Words are hard today. So this is about Lauren Smithfield. So she was a 23-year-old black student living in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and she had died on December 12th, 2021. So she'd been out on a date with a guy she'd met on Bumble 3 days prior. And he's actually the one who called 911. He was an older white man, and he said like that they'd been drinking and all this stuff, and that they woke up in the morning and she was like bleeding from her nose and unresponsive. And when authorities got there, they never questioned him. They never called him a suspect of interest, which I think you should just talk to them anyway to make sure.
Yeah.
But they were like, he seems like a nice guy. It's fine.
Oh, okay. You know who else seemed like a nice guy? Ted Bundy. So, okay.
Literally, people commented that like on because I've been seeing a lot of TikTok videos about this too, which isn't how I originally heard it, but you know, once you know something, it pops up everywhere. And people were like, yeah, they called Ted Bundy a nice guy. They called Ted Bundy like an attractive, nice guy. And they haven't released his name either. Like they're keeping his name private.
Interesting.
So authorities are like, there's no foul play, whatever, but her family believes otherwise. And her autopsy said she died from an overdose on fentanyl combined with prescription medicine and alcohol. But her family does maintain that she never used drugs. They were like, yeah, she would drink, but she was not like a drug user. And they also like aren't saying like where this prescription medicine came from or like trying to figure out where it came from, which I think is an important part too. Like I've seen people speculate like medical examiners, coroners, like try to tell them, like, find out who this prescribed to, whatever.
Yeah.
And the family says the police did not contact them after her body was found. And they didn't collect pieces of evidence, including a sedative pill, bloody sheets, drinks, and a used condom from the apartment. And the family only learned of her death 2 days later because they hadn't heard from her. They went to her apartment, and there was a note on the door that said, if you're looking for Lauren, call this number.
What?
Yeah. So when the police were asked about this, they said, well, we saw her ID and her passport. We didn't need you to confirm who she was.
So there's no need to, like, inform her family? Since you don't need to make an ID, there's still no need to... Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So there's, like, a lot of fishy aspects about this case. And the police are like, accidental overdose, closed shut. But the family doesn't believe that because obviously things... And the police are just dismissing the family. Like, there's a lot of fishy things about this. Like, maybe it was an accidental overdose, but the fact that you're just, like, not collecting evidence. Like, her brother went in the apartment and found all this evidence. Like, it was never treated as a crime scene. It was just like, oh, well.
That's the thing. Like, we don't want anyone to be wrongfully accused if that's what really happened and he just happened to be there. You know, maybe they were doing drugs together, it was an accident, whatever, but it still has to be treated as a crime scene. It still has to, like, there still has to be an investigation to determine that that's for sure what happened. Like, you can't just assume, oh, because he's a nice guy and he seems like he's,
and a lot of people are saying, too, how if this was an older black man and a younger white woman,
Oh, yeah.
it would not be treated like this. So this is the thing. It could be as it seems, but the police are mishandling this case. They're just dismissing the family. Like, you just need to investigate it. And if you come to the conclusion after a full investigation, like, fine. But, like, the family is being dismissed. And as Billy Jensen says, get loud. So just get loud, talk about this case, like, demand that the police, like, actually look into it.
Yeah, that is insane that they're just so dismissive and...
Yeah.
Wow. So we do also have 2 additional updates following our Small Town Virginia Murders episode. So our listener and patron Lisa, who suggested those cases, did provide some additional information. So Reginald Varner was actually stopped on the way to murder his ex-father-in-law as well. So his name was Frank Arena. So at the time that we said that he was pulled over, there was blood in the car, there was an axe in the car, so he was actually on the way to murder his father-in-law after murdering his ex-mother-in-law and ex-wife. So, and we also mentioned that he died in prison at a fairly young age, and we did not know how, and apparently he was found hanging in his cell from an apparent suicide. Who knows for sure, but, you know, in his case, could probably be very likely. Also, we mentioned that we could not find any additional information about Michael Wayne Williams. So Lisa coming in clutch here with all the insider info. So he did take a plea deal in 2003 that changed his death sentence to life without the possibility of parole. So he is still alive. He is still in prison for the remainder of his life, but he is no longer on death row.
Yeah, it helps to have a small town correspondent. That's what I'm gonna call you, Lisa. You're a small town correspondent. But like,
yes,
if we do cover like a case, and especially if it's like a small town, and you're like, I know information that, yeah, you probably wouldn't find Google searching it, because I know someone who knows someone, or the town talks about it, stuff like that. Like, let us know, and we'll talk about it later in an update, like we just did.
Yeah, or like small town newspapers that aren't available online, or, Jaclyn and Courtney don't make enough on Patreon to subscribe to 10,000 small town newspapers, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's, those newspapers deserve their money, but I can't afford it. So.
Especially like all of the different, it's not like, oh, we can just buy like a few. There's so many.
There's so many.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that is all we have today, so we are going to go ahead and get into this case, and I do want to issue a trigger warning here. This episode will handle racial violence and lynching, and so I completely understand if that is something you do not want to listen to, cannot listen to. We will see you next week. We love you. Mwah. Goodbye. So,
yes.
Our sources for today was the edjohnsonproject.com website, Britannica article, oyes.org. Oops, I should have looked up what that was. Oopsie. Sorry, guys. And a CBS News article. And I do want to say this edjohnsonproject.com website, like, go to that website. They have maps, they have pictures, it's an incredible website. Just want to say that. So February is Black History Month, which is an annual observance that originated in the U.S., but is also now being recognized in Canada, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. So while this month is very important, we should also be talking about Black history every month, because Black history is America history. So, but we wanted to take this week in Black History Month to acknowledge a case that's rarely talked about outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And while we do try to highlight Black stories throughout the year, I do think we could do a better job and try to incorporate more stories of color in general. But we did want to take this week in this month to highlight this case. And again, open to any and all constructive feedback you guys have about any case we do. We are 2 white women, so furthesting from experts on this topic.
Yes.
And we're just trying to use our privilege for good, but we fall short too. Just please let us know. We're open to that constructive feedback.
Absolutely.
And at this time, we do also want to direct you to some Black-owned and produced podcasts that you can start listening to. Affirmative Murder, Handcuffed Podcast, Scam Goddess, Cases of Color, Crime Noir, Fruit Loops, Pod Save the People, 1619, and honestly, so many more. Like, I could just sit here for probably 2 hours and read off podcasts.
Yeah.
So please take the time, like this month and every month, to support your local Black-owned business, help your community in any way you can. But please, dear God, do not try to be a white savior.
No, that's not what you're going for. You're not coming in to, like, override and fix. Like, you take a step back. Like, you let the people of color lead in their own communities and let them tell you how you can help and how you can use your privilege.
Yeah, and, like, if you have the choice of going to Subway or going to your locally Black-owned sub shop, like, choose to support local and support Black-owned businesses, like, where you can. Not just this month, every month. It's going to be probably some of the best food you've ever had, because that's been my experience.
For sure.
And, okay, now we're getting into this story, so brace yourself. So the city of Chattanooga in Tennessee was incorporated in 1839, and Chattanooga lies on the Tennessee-Georgia border, so it's, like, right there at the bottom. And Chattanooga's Black community really grew after the Civil War, and the battle for Chattanooga in November 1863 and the recent Union occupation of the city really drew former enslaved people to the city. And after the Civil War, many Black individuals found the city friendlier and more accommodating for them for other places in the South. So by 1900, actually a third of the city's population was Black, which is a pretty big population there.
Oh, yeah, especially at that time in the South.
Mm-hmm. And in 1905, there had been a surge of criminal activity. So, of course, white newspapers are blaming this on the Black community and reported a, quote, Black crime wave was occurring. Although none of this was true. It was all just slander, yellow journalism, everything else. Mm-hmm. So,
also, that sounds very familiar what people say today. So,
oh, just wait.
Yeah.
There's an airplane.
The airplane said, "You just wait."
It was like, pause. I know, we're about to get in the bad part too, so it's like,
just like, the airplane's like, I'm gonna give everybody a minute. We all need just a second.
Okay. So on the night of January 23rd, 1906, Nevada Taylor was walking home from her trolley stop when she was brutally attacked and raped near her family cottage in Forest Hills Cemetery, where her father worked as a caretaker. And she was a white woman, just including that. And on January 25th, 1906, 24-year-old Ed Johnson was arrested in Chattanooga for the rape of Nevada Taylor. And Ed Johnson worked at the Last Chance Saloon, and he'd been working the night of Nevada's rape, and at least 10 witnesses saw him there that night. And they said he'd only left for a short time to get firewood, like, clearly not enough time to, like, go across town, rape her, come back. Mm-hmm. Ed Johnson also worked as a laborer at Thankful Memorial Episcopal Church, and that was very close to Forest Hills Cemetery. He had been unable to work leading up to the attack, though, due to the cold weather. And this is where Will Hickson, a white man, said as shit from Schmidt from New Girl. You know what I'm talking about? When
No.
he goes, a white man. Oh, okay. Anyway, it's a thing. Anyway, was able to obtain his name. He went to the church and asked the foreman for Ed's name. He was like, who's that guy who works for you? Mm-hmm. And then Will Hickson falsely accused him in order to get the $375 reward. So that'd be about $11,600 in today's money. So quite a bit of money, but he was literally just trying to get the reward. So the night Ed was arrested, a large mob stormed the jail, but they were unable to find him. And the sheriff had moved him from Chattanooga to Nashville, and he stayed away until his trial on February 6th. And they kept him away because they were scared he was going to be lynched. So at this point, as soon as he's arrested, they know, like, this is a threat. Mm-hmm. And at Ed's trial, around 10 witnesses testified that Ed was working at the saloon that night, and Will Hickson himself came to testify. The victim, Nevada Taylor, also testified at the trial, and on the witness stand, one juror asked, "Is this the man?" And she answered, "To the best of my knowledge and belief, he's the same man." And another juror asked, But Miss Taylor, can you state positively that this is the man, the one who attacked you? And she responded and said, I will not swear that he is the man, but I believe he could be the man who assaulted me. And another juror said, in God's name, Miss Taylor, tell us positively, is he the guilty man? Can you say it? Can you swear it? And she just shook her head. So even at this point, the victim is like, they're telling me it's him, but I can't swear it's him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
I do feel a little sorry for her because she's kind of like, what do I do? Like, because she was also raped. I think we talked about this kind of in our Patreon episode with a similar case that happened very recently. See, again, these things keep happening.
Yeah, like she's even on the stand being like, I think so, but I don't know. So it's like, there are many, many cases of white women who knowingly falsely accuse black men, and I don't know. I mean, that could be the case here, but it seems like if on the stand she's saying, like, I think so, but I don't know, like, honestly, she's probably just traumatized and not sure, and, you know.
And they're like, can you positively identify it? And she's shaking her head no, which, I mean, is kind of brave if you think about it, to not just be like, yeah, it's him.
Especially with that kind of, like, how intensely they are, like tell us, is it him? Is it him? In God's name, is this the man?
Yeah, and, like, you know, it's that thing, too, where you're like, well, someone's coming forward being like, I mean, I don't know what all Will Hickson said, but being like, I know it's him. So you're just like, I guess it's him. Like, if they're saying it's him, like, you, especially, like, even today, like, people want to trust, like, when the police are like, we found your man, like, you want to trust that, especially in 1906. Like, you're like, okay, but I can't tell you that's him for sure. So at this time, a juror tried to rush towards him, but was restrained. He pointed at Ed and said, if I could get him, I would tear his heart out right now. This is during trial.
And this is after the witness or the victim is saying, I don't know. Like,
yes.
Okay.
So clearly this is not an impartial jury. This is not a fair trial. And on February 9th, the all-white, all-male jury still found him guilty and sentenced him to death. And Ed said, I guess I'll have to suffer for what somebody else did. So two pioneering black attorneys, Noah Pardon and Style Hutchins, took up the case on appeal, even though they were receiving threats of violence for their efforts to overturn this case. And Ed's father, Skinbone Johnson, had begged them to take the case. And Style Hutchins was the first African-American lawyer ever to be admitted to the Georgia bar. So,
wow.
They filed a petition on March 3rd on the basis that African-Americans had been excluded illegally from the jury, that his counsel had not challenged this, and they should have asked for a change of venue. So they're like, these things were wrong in this case. Like, obviously, before the trial, they had moved him in fear of the mobs. So why had his counsel not been like, we need to change the venue, because everyone here already tried to, like, kill this guy before he went to trial. Like,
right? Like, if you feel strongly enough that he's going to be harmed, that you have to take him out of the city, his trial should not be in that city. Like,
yeah. It was also said that his lawyers encouraged him to waive his appeals due to believing that the community, quote, would not stand for an appeal. So they outright told them that, like, this would cause a lynch mob and the sheriff probably wouldn't protect him this time. And this is an actual quote from the court documents from his lawyer that said, Ed, there are two choices here. You can accept the verdict of the court and die in orderly, lawful manner, or you can die horridly in the hands of the mob. Do you want to die in the mob? Do you want to die in orderly fashion, or do you want a lynch mob to take you from your cell, drag you into the streets, beat you, hang you in front of everyone, leaving your body there for you to come there for all to see, and then come for your family? His lawyer said this to him. His lawyer.
This is insane.
So, of course, Ed's like, no, I don't want a lynch mob to come get me and then attack my family. Like,
yeah.
Of course you're not going to appeal after your counsel, your lawyer says that.
Like, the one person who is supposed to, like, defend you and stick up for you and get the best possible outcome for you is telling you, like, you should just accept to die this way because it's going to be less painful.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then his lawyer said, do you want us to do what we think is best in deciding on an appeal? And so, of course, Ed responded and said, yes, sir, I will tell the judge I'm ready to die, but I will also say I am not the guilty man. And despite all of this, too, the petition was dismissed. So despite all of that being like, clearly his lawyers weren't on his side, all this, the petition was still dismissed. So the community was trying to help raise money for Ed's Supreme Court case to be heard, and Noah Pardon was able to get a 10-minute meeting with U.S. Supreme Court Justice John Marshall Harlan. And the morning of this appeal, Pardon and Hutchins building was set on fire by arson, but thankfully no one was hurt. So they're like, the city is now attacking his lawyers too. Like, they're just on a rampage. So John Marshall Harlan was a Supreme Court justice from 1877 till his death in 1911, and he had been appointed by Rutherford B. Hayes and had been a lawyer in Kentucky. So John Marshall Harlan had become famous for his dissents in the 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson. So a little history on this case, because I'd not heard of it. Like, they were just like, oh, he had great thoughts about the Supreme Court case. And I was like, I don't know what that case is. I don't know. So Louisiana enacted the Separate Car Act that required separate cars for white and black riders. And in 1892, Homer Plessy, who was 7/8 white, agreed to participate in challenging the act. So technically, under Louisiana law, he was black. Even though he was only 1/8 black, they still were like, nope, you're black. So he had been solicited by the Committee of Citizens to sit in a white-only car. And when Plessy was told to evacuate the car, he refused and was arrested. And at trial, Plessy's lawyers argued that the Separate Car Act violated both Plessy's 13th and 14th Amendment. Just if you need a refresher, the 13th Amendment is the one that abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, and the 14th Amendment granted citizenship and equal civil and legal rights to black and enslaved people after they'd been emancipated after the Civil War. So obviously both these amendments have a history of issues even to today, but that is what they were, and they were saying, you doing this is violating two of his amendments.
So, however, the judge in Plessy's trial disagreed with his lawyers and he was convicted. So this did go to the Supreme Court, who found that the act was constitutional. And they said, in short, that segregation did not in itself constitute unlawful discrimination. Okay. Again, this is a panel of all white men, so clearly they just know exactly what they're talking about. So with this, Supreme Court Judge Harlan disagreed heavily with the ruling. So in his dissent, he stated that the Constitution was colorblind and that the U.S. should have no class system. He expressed fear that the majority of the court was consigning black citizens to the U.S. to a permanent condition of legal inferiority. So obviously, like, Harlan's probably still a racist because the whole colorblind ideal is not what's best that we recognize now. But for the 1870s, like, that's a pretty progressive viewpoint for a white judge.
And him saying, like, if you guys keep doing this, like, you are, like, assigning black citizens to always be, like, legally inferior. And, like, how fucking right he was.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm sure he had issues, but for the time, like, he had some pretty progressive thoughts. Like, I don't want to, like, sit here and be like, let's erect a statue of him. But, like, that is, like, pretty profound, I guess, for the time of, like, being able to recognize, like, y'all are screwing everyone over. Like,
yeah. So, since he had written this dissent, Noah Pardon pleaded to Harlan in this 10-minute meeting, and Harlan did issue a stay of execution on March 18th, 1906. So, this would allow the Supreme Court to hear Ed Johnson's case. A telegraph was sent to the sheriff to retain custody of Ed pending the appeal, and while Noah Pardon was presenting arguments to Harlan, Ed had a final wish to attend church at St. James Baptist Church. So the Hamilton County Sheriff Joseph Shipp was scared of the mob violence, so he prohibited Ed from leaving the jail, because he's like, I think this is a bad idea, like, they're going to come get you. I don't think so. However, 300 members of the congregation and Reverend W.B. Fleming came to the jail on March 18, 1906. Johnson was baptized by a member of that church and reaffirmed his innocence, stating he was at peace and ready to die, and he forgave those who fought against him. So he was not allowed to go to the church, so the church came to him.
Which I like that they at least did that, which I'm like,
yeah,
probably if you did let him go to that church, you probably would have a bunch of white people attacking this church, which is absolutely sad and disgusting.
Yeah. So the news about the stay was printed in the newspapers on March 19th, and there were open conversations at this point about storming the jail. So Sheriff Ship.
He has a terrible name. He's a terrible person, so I'm going to say, fuck
right.
that guy's name.
So this fucker sent all guards and jailers home but one, a 72-year-old sheriff's deputy. So clearly the security of this place is super tight right now.
And this is like a 1906 72-year-old man too. Think about that. I know that we're all thinking of Dolly Parton. This isn't fucking Dolly Parton. This is probably this guy who's so ready to fucking die.
Yeah. He's like, I don't even care. He
probably has no teeth. There's no health care. He's probably just I don't know how I'm still alive either, all right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
He's I'm still
here. Working.
Yeah.
I don't want to. So I was just thinking about that too, of what this man probably looked like. With no health care, no medicine. He's just I don't know why I'm still here.
He's like, I'm just hanging out. So clearly Sheriff Ship was a piece of shit and just left this single old man to defend the jail. So, at this point, a mob of around 25 to 50 men broke into the jail about 8:30 p.m., because clearly they could very easily overtake this one deputy on duty, and the mob did kidnap Ed and take him to Walnut Street Bridge. So, by the time they reached the bridge, the mob was now over 100 men, so they're just collecting people along the way. Mm-hmm. They demanded that he confess to this crime, and Ed told the mob, "God bless you all, I am an innocent man." The mob then tried to hang Ed, but after failed attempts, they shot him to death instead. Actually, over 200 times they shot him. So, and then a note was placed on Ed's body that read, "Chief Harlan, thanks for your kind consideration of him. You can find him at the morgue." So around midnight, after the mob dispersed, G.W. Franklin arrived and took the body of Ed Johnson to his establishment. So Franklin was the first black undertaker in Chattanooga. And on March 20th, thousands of black citizens, men and women, refused to go to work in protest of this racial injustice. Large groups gathered and discussed what had happened the night before, and then Sheriff Ship called in the National Guard and ordered arms dealers to not sell any guns to black citizens. So in this situation, 100 white men murdered this man, but don't let the black people have guns, because clearly they're the ones that we should fear right now. Okay. Mm-hmm. Again, this is very similar to, today, when police kill a black man, and we have these protests, and then here come the National Guard shooting rubber bullets and macing everyone. So, cool.
Yeah, because the black community was just we're not going to go work for these white people who just killed one of our own, and we're going to protest, and we're going to talk about what happened, and now they're oh, we're so scared. And I'm y'all just overtook this man and murdered him when honestly he didn't do it. He was an innocent man, and now you're I'm so scared.
Yeah,
what?
What? Yeah, but clearly over 110 years later, we are still seeing the exact same situations played out again and again.
Which I think is why this one was so important to do, because it's just it's still so relevant, and that's the shitty thing. And obviously we're not trying to celebrate Black History Month by talking about a black man being lynched. That's not
yeah,
but his story does deserve to be told and be everyone's oh, things have come so far, we've come so far, what are you talking about? And it's no, look at this case from 1906 and tell me there's not identical similarities to today. We got a long way to go, y'all.
Yeah, for sure. So Ed Johnson's funeral was held at Primitive Baptist Church, and originally it was planned for the funeral to be at Ed's sister's house, but as the number of attendees rose to 3,000, it had to be relocated. So tons of people want to come and show their respect to this man. The services did focus on the dignity of Ed and did not mention his violent end. They really wanted to focus on who he was as a person and not what happened to him. Ed was laid to rest in the prestigious Pleasant Gardens Cemetery, and Johnson's community paid for the plot and a large headstone that read, "Farewell, God bless you all, I am an innocent man. Ed Johnson, born 1882, died March 1906. Blessed are the dead that die in the Lord." So they really, they're not going to let him be buried without a headstone, without this, recognition. So his community really came together to at least try to do right by him after his death.
Yeah.
So after the lynching on March 21st, President Roosevelt ordered an investigation by the Secret Service into Ed's lynching. And in 1907, an unprecedented criminal trial was held by the Supreme Court, with the justices acting as jurors. To this day, it remains the only criminal trial held by the court. So the justices tried 25 men with contempt of court for their defiance of the court's stay of execution. But not lynching this man to death, not kidnap, just the.
They're just pissed because we're like, we set a stay of execution. We didn't get to do that.
Right.
We didn't get to have our stay, and now we're mad.
We wanted to do it, not y'all. So y'all are in trouble for breaking our rules, not for literal murder. Mm-hmm. So 6 men, including Sheriff Shipp, were convicted. So Shipp and 2 others were sentenced to 90 days in jail, and the 3 others were sentenced to 60 days in jail. Mm-hmm. And they were welcomed back to Chattanooga by a crowd of 10,000 people and a band playing "I Wish I Was in Dixie."
Yep.
Again, I get Kyle Rittenhouse vibes here,
Yep.
So the same day the men were found guilty, Ed's petition was abated by death and dismissed. So Noah Pardon and Styles Hutchins also left Chattanooga after this for fear of being lynched themselves. They're like, we've seen what you did to this man, we're not going to stick around and wait for this to happen to us too.
Yeah, they literally burned their building the day before, and they see this and they're like, we can't stay here. We can't.
So efforts to create a memorial began in 1999 when LaFrederick Thurkill organized a cleanup of the historic Pleasant Garden Cemetery where Ed is buried. So his tombstone, like we said, is engraved with his last words, "God bless you all, I am an innocent man." And upon learning of his case, LaFrederick wrote a play called Dead Innocent, the Ed Johnson Story. He also met with groups around the country that were working to address racial violence. LaFrederick used the proceeds from a performance of the play to start the Ed Johnson Memorial Scholarship Fund. And with the memorial, Thurkill said, "The Walnut Street Bridge now can be a place that doesn't bring so much sadness. This memorial can be a place that brings some healing for some and some happiness for others, some vindication, finally some satisfaction that Ed's name is being recognized in such a beautiful way." Then in 2000, Pastor Paul McDaniels successfully petitioned the Hamilton County Court to overturn Johnson's conviction. So that became effective on February 25th, 2000. So they asked to set aside the conviction and dismiss it, but not expunge it. Because if they expunged it, basically all court records, all history of it will be gone. So they did not want that to happen because they wanted to make sure that Ed's story could still be told. That's why they did not petition for expungement. Then in 2016, the Tennessee House adopted a resolution honoring Ed and calling his lynching unjustifiable.
2016.
Yeah.
2016.
And, is lynching ever justifiable?
No. We don't live in a country with those standards.
No, that's not how this works here.
That's the thing. If we all want to talk about, go America. America believes innocent until proven guilty. And the thing a part of that is you get a trial and you get appeals. And you are supposed to let it go through the court system. And if they're still found guilty by the court system, which is extremely flawed, another story for another day. But if they still do, and they are you're sentenced to death, and they do it, you're not allowed to just come in and be like, well, I don't like that he got a stay of execution. I'm just going to do it myself. You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
So in September of 2021, so just a few months before this recording, a memorial was officially established for Ed Johnson, Noah Pardon, and Styles Hutchins. It does stand by Walnut Street Bridge, which is now a pedestrian bridge. And at the dedication of the memorial, Chattanooga Mayor Tim Kelly issued a proclamation apologizing to Ed Johnson for the miscarriage of justice that occurred on March 19th, 1906. Again, so many years later.
Mm-hmm.
So, Donovan Brown, chair of the Ed Johnson Project Committee, described the memorial as an opportunity to move forward in a difficult process of healing. And he said, if I burn down your house and then build a monument of your house, we're not going to be healed. There are some things I may have to engage with you on if I actually want to get to a place of healing. I actually might need to rebuild your house. Now, we can't rebuild Ed Johnson's body. We can't re-import his spirit into a monument. But the best thing we can do is something that emblematic of his life and legacy that his case had and his lawyers. Unfortunately, we are not able to find any further information about Ed Johnson's life. He was a beloved son and community member. He was just a young man trying to do his best and work and live his life and be a productive member of society who was wrongfully convicted and murdered at the hands of the people before he could have the chance to be murdered by the state, who was also going to murder him. I mean, it's horrific. It really is.
Yeah. And had you heard of this case before this?
No, not at all.
So I'd been to Chattanooga one time and gone on a ghost tour. And they had passed Walnut Street Bridge and mentioned offhandedly, oh, somebody was lynched here, ghost, blah, blah, blah. And so I was looking up cases, what are some cases that can be done, for Black History Month, and this one popped up, and I was like, I've heard of this, but how is nobody still talking about this? Now there is the memorial, so it is a little bit more talked about, but that's been in the last year, and I live an hour and a half from Chattanooga and had never heard the details of this story besides the fact offhandedly one time it was oh, there was a lynching on this bridge.
That's crazy. So that is the absolutely tragic story of Ed Johnson. Like Courtney mentioned, we're not trying to talk about lynchings and the suffering of the Black community in celebration of Black History Month, but we really think that it's important, especially for our white listeners, to acknowledge that this is still an ongoing thing, that there are still so many injustices that were never not that you could remedy them after the fact, but weren't even acknowledged, that it happened. So many other things in history that we can look back and say oh, that was wrong. But then you have stuff like this that it takes until, a few years ago for them to issue an apology and have a memorial and stuff like that. So,
and the fact that you can't find anything about Ed Johnson's life except he worked at two places and then this story. And Ed Johnson deserves to have his story told, which is kind of why we focus on this, but we don't want to be oh, we're just talking about the trauma of the Black community.
Yes. So that being said, we do have another episode coming this month where we are going to talk about Black pioneers in the true crime community. So looking at, law enforcement and attorneys and people who have worked with, creating new laws and all kinds of, people who have done so much good for the Black community and for our community as a whole. So we do have that coming later this month. So we just wanted to acknowledge that, but we felt this story was important to tell and important to acknowledge. I hear it so much. I know you hear it. I know our listeners hear it of why do we have Black History Month? Where's White History Month? Where's blah, blah, blah. No, just stop. White History Month is every month. It doesn't get its own special recognition because it's everywhere, because it's prominent, because it doesn't get lost in everything else. So that's why there's a specific month set aside to celebrate and honor this community that has been so wronged since the inception of our country and before. So that's why we are telling this story. That's why we are acknowledging that this month is important to acknowledge and celebrate. But like Courtney said in the beginning, you should also treat every month as Black History Month, and it should be a part of regular history because it is. But we also want to take a special time to celebrate these lives.
Yeah. And I think that was the hard thing too, is trying to find ways as white women to talk about it, but also not be we're celebrating Black History Month. Here's a horrific lynching story. That's not we're not trying to re-traumatize anyone. And that's why I made sure to put that trigger warning at the beginning. please skip this if this is something you cannot handle. I respect that. We respect that. So yeah, we are going to do that of like celebrating, you know, different prominent Black people in the community who also deserve recognition for the amazing work they've done.
Absolutely. So Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week, first I want to give an update on a previous perk of the week that I did have my massage and that it was absolutely wonderful. And I could have kissed her at the end of it because it was just magic.
I think that's against the rules, Courtney. I don't think that's the kind of massage place you were at.
Yeah, I didn't get a happy ending. There was no happy endings there except for the fact that I just wanted to take a nap on that table for like 3 hours.
Yep.
But my perk of the week this week is yesterday I went and got a facial because it's like self-care month over here. My toxic trait is that I'm getting married and think I can go spend all this money on massages and facials and waxing, and that's my toxic trait. Anyway.
It's all important for the wedding, so it's fine.
I will say my skin has never looked better. You can't really see in this FaceTime, but my nose is looking mwah. Anyway. So yeah, I did get a facial. It did kind of hurt. But then it was kind of relaxing a little bit at the end. But she basically just exfoliated and like scraped the shit out of my face to get these blackheads and these pores. And she was really nice and she was really cool. And yeah, I scheduled another one the week before the wedding. So, oops. But yeah, so that is my perk of the week, is a facial. If you're thinking of getting a facial, you should do it. It's great for your skin. Skincare, you're going to want it now. If you know, you're a younger listener, you're going to want it now and not 15 years from now because it'll be too late then. So be sure and cleanse and moisturize, and it's never too early to use anti-aging stuff. That's my little spiel. So.
And speaking of skincare, Andrew and I got into an argument yesterday over who has worse bags under their eyes because he tried to tell me that his are worse. And I'm like, I'm sorry, sir. You do not wake up with this infant multiple times a night, every night for the last 8 months. So I want to hear about the bags under your eyes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Just a little concealer. Just water. Actually, drinking water can help with the bags under your eyes. So if Andrew's severely dehydrated, he might have worse bags, and that's not on sleep deprivation.
That is true, because I do drink a lot of water, and he also drinks, like, no water. So,
yeah. So.
That might. Yeah, drink your water, guys.
Yeah, drink your water, moisturize, anti-aging. Those are my 3 tips. And if you do moisturize, be sure and apply upwards and not downwards because gravity. Anyway.
And
I'm not an esthetician.
Put your moisturizer on like not damp skin, but like after you get out of the shower before like dry off. I don't put it on wet skin. But no, that's definitely a thing. That's what Millie's doctor told me for her eczema and drying out her skin. Yeah, she's like, make sure and put the lotion on like right after she gets out of the bath where it's still like moist, I guess is the right word. But it's not really like you're dry, but it's just like immediately after you dry off. Like it absorbs the moisturizer better. Yes.
Okay.
So put your lotion on right after you get out of the shower, but dry off first.
Don't put lotion on your face. Use moisturizer on your face. Just a PSA. I don't want someone out here using like I don't know, Dove on their face. Anyway. I'm not an esthetician. What do I know? Anyway,
Jaclyn and Courtney Skincare Corner. That's what you guys are here for, right?
Yes. So Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is How I Met Your Father. So I was not sure how I was going to feel about it. They did release the first 2 episodes. I think the 3rd one just came out. I haven't watched it yet. But I really like it so far. Like the first 5 minutes in, I was like, I'm going to hate this because it was kind of like recreating a How I Met Your Mother scene where I was like, oh, this is dumb. It's just going to redo. And they've had a few moments like that I'm like, eh. But as a whole, I really enjoy it. And I think it's funny and I think it's still original in its own way, but ties into How I Met Your Mother. And yeah, so far I like it. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know. I haven't watched it yet. I'm a little skeptical of it.
Yeah, I was too.
Let me know how you like it. But yeah.
Yeah, so that is my perk of the week. If you guys want to tell us your skincare routines, the TV shows you're watching, y'all know the drill. You can find us on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod, on Twitter at CAF Crimes Pod. That's CAFF Crimes Pod. We are on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast. You can email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com if you feel so inclined and you want to help us get some subscriptions to local newspapers for us to find these small town cases. We are on patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes, where we now have 18 bonus episodes that you can go back and listen to. We put out a new one every month. We have stickers, pins, Google Hangouts, all kinds of fun things happening over there. So make sure and come check it out.
Yeah, and we have like ones as low as $3, $5. You don't have to go and spend $20 a month. I know sometimes it's like, I can't do Patreon. That's like so much money. But you could do like a $5 tier. You get all the bonus episodes with that, the Discord. So yeah, and we are still doing our Apple Reviews giveaway. We're very close to 50. Once we get to 50, we'll pick someone to get a pin, a sticker, and a $10 gift card, coffee shop of their choice. I did look, and you can review on Spotify now. So if you do listen on Spotify, you can go to our podcast. Right underneath, it'll say rating, and you can rate it. You don't have to leave a comment. You just do 5 stars, and you're done. Please don't do 1. You can do 4, but not 1. So if you want to give us some reviews there too, any review helps, any rating helps, just to, boost our ego. But yeah, and in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.